Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Thursday, September 5th, and Grace and I are joined today by Baylor Linebackers coach Jamar Chaney. Coach, hope you're doing well. How nice was it to get the season started with the W?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. It felt pretty good to get on the grass and go against somebody else besides going against each other in practice every day. So felt good. Felt good to get a win, and looking forward to our game against Utah this week.
Coach, how just kind of take me through the process of you coming to Baylor and what made Baylor kind of the place for you coming from Western Kentucky, and what kind of stands out about, just Baylor as a whole?
Mainly, the opportunity that I think the first thing I looked at is kind of, the opportunity to work with Coach Aranda. He's a defensive guy, but he's also a linebacker guy. That's the position I played as a player, and that's the position I wanted to coach. So getting the opportunity to learn from the best, but also just doing research on Baylor and just finding out about it, being an opportunity to go in the Big 12 and play against the type of teams and things like that. And me and my wife was hearing nothing but great things about Waco as well. So it kind of was I guess a no-brainer when I actually got the opportunity to join the staff.
So you mentioned working with Coach Aranda. How has that been with him being obviously the play caller, defensive coordinator, transitioning away from just being the CEO, the head coach, but working beside him this year? And how much have you learned in that short amount of time that you've been with him already?
I think I've learned a lot. I think this is my sixth year in the college profession as far as coaching wise. And I think, just this time I don't be with him, I don't learn, I know a lot more than I learned in that period of time before I got here. This is just me trying to soak in everything and learn from him. He's very involved this year, so he's very involved with the defense, very involved with the linebacker. So, I just, take that time to soak it in and add a couple of those things to the way I'm teaching and things like that as far as working with the linebacker. So it's been a blessing, with the opportunity. We're excited to coach. I love coaching and all that, but it's always good to feel like you're growing every day too at the same time.
Coach, I know this offseason y'all brought in, multiple different guys to the roster through the transfer portal, but specifically two guys from Western Kentucky in Kendrick Simpkins and Jacquez Evans. What was it about those two guys that you got to see in person at Western Kentucky that made it kind of a no-brainer that you felt like they need to be at Baylor as well?
Well, Jacquez Evans was actually a player that I coached. I coached outside linebackers at Western Kentucky, and just the things he can do. He was a guy that can make a lot of plays, a guy that knows football, that was football smart, that was tough. But when the lights come on, he shines at the brightest, when the lights come on. And he made a lot of plays at Western Kentucky. He was an all-conference player there, over 100 tackles, 9 sacks. So got to see it, the way he prepares and things like that, and the way he was able to get after the quarterback. But not only that, it was a complex defense, him able to drop in coverage and do those things. So he's a really good player, man. And I got to see firsthand that with Kendrick Simpkins, man, he was our guy that we found ways. He moved around. He played linebacker, defensive end, safety. Man, we moved him around a lot just because he had that playmaker ability, especially to get after the quarterback in the pass game. And you don't see too many DBs that's able to do that. And he's one of those guys that, you kind of got to know where he's aligned at because, he can affect that play really fast, as far as getting after the quarterback.
So looking to your room this year specifically with Matt Jones and Keaton Thomas, when you coach those two guys, I know we've heard a lot about Keaton's energy and the way that he's a leader for this team, but what is it like coaching both of them and the talent that they bring to your room?
Well, Keaton, he brings just so much, energy. No matter if it's a walkthrough or a scrimmage, whatever the case may be, he's going to come out there the same way as far as mindset, focus, ready, getting a full speed rep, trying to do every rep like he's in, visualizing himself in the Big 12 championship. That's kind of how he prepares, and that's good, for that he prepared that. So no moment is too big for him. He's a guy that also, you quickly forget they walked on out of school, and then bet on himself and went to junior college to, to earn a couple scholarships. But he was a walk-on, so he's hungry. I mean, he got a chip on his shoulder for for him having to do that, not having those opportunities coming straight out of high school. So you can tell he has that chip on his shoulder every time, every day, and it's been good for us to have because I think his energy, his mindset, it kind of rubs off on the other guys, and just having Matt Jones, a guy that's as smart as he is. I mean, he's a captain out there. He understands everything that's going on. I think we play. I mean, it's good to have him out there because I think we play so much better while he's out there on the field just because he's been exposed to so many, defenses, so many different coaches. So, I mean, you can give him something like right now, and he'll know it by the time we go out to practice. Not only know it, but he'll know it the way he can make the checks and anticipate things coming like that. So he's that type of player, and I'm excited to see those two, have those two guys out there at the same time. It's just like, I think it's good for Baylor, good for our defense, and like I said, good for the whole organization as far as having those guys and the work ethic they put in as far as like each day in, day out, as far as trusting the process and not just leaning on, the little success that we've had in the spring and fall camp and even the first game, man. They're hungry to make sure this is a successful season on defense, but overall a successful season for the Baylor football team.
Last year, Utah ran for a bunch of yards against Baylor in a game that was in McLean Stadium. When you kind of go back and look at that film, and then, of course, fast forward to this year, what are some of the keys that you've been focusing on for your linebacker group this week before y'all head up to Salt Lake City?
Well, I think, everybody knows. Anytime you play Utah, you better be ready to play a physical game, on the offense and defensive line. I actually had a chance of playing when I was in Florida to open the season. And Cam Rising was the starting quarterback that year in 2022. So like I said, but man, you just got to buckle your got to be ready to go. If you're a linebacker, this is the type of game you want to play in. You want to play against the best, and Utah is considered one of the best in this conference. Not only one of the best in this conference, but probably one of the best in the country as far as one of the most consistent programs. One of the programs that wins 9 to 12 games a season. So they don't lose too many games at home. So. There's no need for motivation or pep talks this week. You better be ready to go or it's gonna get ugly quick.
Yeah. So with your experience facing Cam Rising, Coach Aranda mentioned this specifically in his press conference about how he can get them in and out of plays and figure out what the best sets. How much stress does that put on the linebacker position in understanding that he's going to make changes and there's potential for the defense to make changes off of what he does?
Yeah, I think that's big time to have somebody like that with that kind of experience. It's kind of like having Matt on defense. He has a lot of experience. And this is his 6th year. So he's seen a lot of things on the football field. But I kind of compare it to the linebacker wise of going against in the college version of a guy like with me playing like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. You make the simplest mistake out there, that guy's gonna see it. It's not too many things that he hasn't seen from a defense. So. It's gonna be hard to fool them and things like that. You just got to go out there and do your job, your 111, and hopefully we can execute better than they can execute. But it's challenging, but it's also fun going against guys like that that's gonna bring that type of game, and you have to be prepared to be able to be successful.
Was there a focus for you and Dave Aranda when you first got to Baylor that y'all sat down and said, okay, this is what we need to get better at the linebacker position specifically? Was there one or two things that y'all have really, really worked hard on this offseason to make sure it gets corrected from a year ago?
I can't pinpoint one thing. I just know that, he really emphasizes, and me including, like I said, I played the position, just linebackers have to make plays, especially with him calling, especially in this defense. Those guys make plays, and we need those guys to, if they get a one-on-one in pressure, we need them to win. They got one-on-one coach, we need them to win. So that's, one thing we try to emphasize, man, we have to make plays at this position. When the opportunity presents itself, we have to capitalize and make plays. And that's what we plan on doing this year, man. Just making plays when being your best when your best is needed, and that's what we're trying to do as far as each and every day, trying to make sure we maximize the day, get 1% better. But when it comes down to it on Saturdays, day game, night game, whatever it may be, the linebackers are out there flying around, playing fast, playing violent, and making plays.
Coach Cheney, we really appreciate your time today. Safe travels up to Utah, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Oh, sounds good, man. Thanks for having me, man. Signal.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Coach.
No problem.
All right, Grayson, great conversation with Coach Cheney. Really cool to speak with him. Obviously, his playing days back in college and in the NFL. Obviously, now a coach at Baylor. But what was the biggest thing you took away from that conversation with Coach Cheney? And being a young guy that's kind of working side by side with Coach Aranda, who's now the defensive coordinator, but they're in the same room coaching linebackers together. What a cool opportunity for him to do that.
It definitely is. I mean, that's a awesome opportunity. And he mentioned that right off the top as to why he came to Baylor, calling it a no-brainer to go work with Dave Aranda, which makes perfect sense. Dave Aranda is so respected by every coach, really, that we've ever talked to or come across. So that was really nice to see. I think the biggest thing, though, with Jamar Chaney was just him talking about the linebacker group and how they've been coached this offseason and how they've been developed this offseason. Just kind of the mindset of the group, the go out, make plays, force turnovers, be solid in those regards, but also take advantage when opportunities are there. That was something that was lacking a year ago. They did not create enough havoc at that position. I think that's definitely something that they want to fix. And he mentioned Keaton Thomas and Matt Jones specifically as guys who continue to take big strides and make big moves this offseason, heading into this season as well.
Yeah, so that was really cool. We asked him specifically about what they brought to the room, those two linebackers, Keaton Thomas, Matt Jones. We've seen already what Keaton brings in a short amount of time. We haven't watched him, obviously, in scrimmage or anything like that, but immediately he's making plays. The pick six was awesome to see. And he's truly just around the line of scrimmage all the time. Like I feel like he is going to be a guy that is going to will Baylor to improve every single weekend. But my biggest takeaway was his talk about Matt Jones and being the guy that gets him into sets and comparing him to the opposite of Cam Rising to an extent. It's like you have two old dudes on this game, particular on Saturday, Matt Jones playing middle linebacker and Cam Rising playing quarterback, that are going to attempt to get their teams in the best positions to succeed. Throw in the helmet communication. You have good offensive coordinators, good defensive coordinators helping them get in those positions. But I'm really excited to continue to see Matt under Coach Cheney, but also Coach Aranda develop and truly just playing consistently at one position for the first time in his career.
Yeah, that's a total just great matchup when you talk about Cam Rising and Matt Jones, just being able to kind of read the offense and read the defense and just kind of going at a little mental battle. That will be a lot of fun to watch. I think, at times we've talked about Matt Jones as kind of being an underrated guy and a guy that, we feel like at times has meant a ton to this Baylor defense, and probably more so than people really will recognize. Does that mean he's a perfect player? No, but I do think that you're seeing probably his best attributes come out this season because he's getting to play next to a very athletic linebacker in Keaton Thomas that can kind of make up for the things he doesn't do great. And then Matt Jones can make up for maybe the things that Keaton doesn't do great. So they complement each other really well. And I think that's key for this unit. And we talked about it when we talked about the linebacker preview. It's very important that these two guys stay healthy because Baylor's definitely counting on both of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're Keaton's just a special talent in general. Matt's an older guy, so you want those two to be on the field. And I really think back to like Dylan Doyle and Terrell Bernard in 2021. And Dylan Doyle is still good after Terrell Bernard was gone, but Dylan Doyle was not the exact same as he was with Terrell Bernard playing beside him. I think Matt, like you mentioned, is benefiting from a guy like Keaton Thomas, or will benefit. We will see it more and more, benefit from playing against or next to Keaton Thomas, who can go and make plays. Matt can go and make plenty of plays, but he's not going to be relied upon to be the only playmaker at the linebacker position. Last year, Mike Smith gets hurt early on, but Keaton just said it athletically, just a different level. The former safety, he transitions to linebacker and just brings a whole new element to that room. One of the things I didn't get to ask Coach Cheney that I wanted to was about Raw Dilworth playing the middle linebacker position and how he might be used. I know he probably wouldn't say anything too specific, but he's a guy to watch for the depth purposes in the linebacker room directly because of the versatility he brings.
He definitely is, and I had that one written down as well. I also wanted to ask about Kylan Reed, but we could only get to certain things. But yeah, I think rah-rah, based on what we've heard from Dave Aranda, based on what we've heard from, I believe it was Keaton Thomas, who also mentioned him. He's a guy that seems like he's going to play a lot. He didn't play a ton in the first game. I don't know if that was because they weren't really in situations where he would play. Because like you said, when he was recruited, it was primarily packages type player. So I'm very curious to see what those packages look like and what exactly that means for him and his role in this defense going forward. But my expectation is we'll see him more in this game against Utah.
Yeah, when those linebackers are stressed more in the passing game, you're going to see some substitutions that aid the passing game, the passing defense. So really, really anxious to see that. And it could start this weekend against Utah. Obviously, we know about Cam Rising and what their tight ends bring to the table, so it might be an opportunity for him to do that. So let's move into the defensive keys for the game against Utah. I'm sure you have a list that you want to get to, and I have a few as well. So I'll let you start, and we'll kind of feed off each other, go back and forth here. But what's your first key for this defensive unit? Probably similar to mine, but I'm anxious to hear what you have to say as well.
Can they stop the run? That is my first thing. And they gave up 224 yards rushing last year. Now, understanding that they also had Jaquindon Jackson as their running back, who is, I think, far better than what they currently have on the roster. And also understanding that they brought in Nate Johnson at quarterback to run the football. And he's a very dynamic, explosive athlete. And Baylor couldn't do anything about it. You know, they were even trying to just leave guys on an island, but it didn't matter. Utah gained too much momentum by the end of that game that Utah just ran over Baylor by the end. I mean, that's simply put what happened. And so can Baylor respond to that? You know, can these guys come in with a much better game plan? Can the defensive line continue to build off what we saw in week one and really be able to slow down the Utah offensive line and the Utah run game as a whole? And then can they allow Keaton Thomas and Matt Jones and Carl Williams to get into the backfield and create those tackles for losses and really be able to, gang up and bring running backs down and not allow extra yards after contact? I think that's just such a massive part of this. They really need to do everything they can to not necessarily make Utah one-dimensional, but definitely to really impose their will in key situations, such as not giving up a 3rd and 2 first down, not giving up a goal line touchdown on 4th down. Like, can you step up in those big instances? And then obviously consistently throughout the game would be key as well. But I think those big instances are probably the biggest factor in this one.
Yeah, I think back to that game last year and how often the offensive line for Utah just took full advantage of what Baylor had on the defensive front. You can't let your linebackers have offensive linemen in their lap all the time. It eliminates their playmaking ability, specifically in Coach Aranda's defense that wants his linebackers to make plays. He wants the guys. We heard Coach Cheney say it, like, these guys need to make plays. That is how this defense is built. It's not for the defensive lineman to go get tons of tackles for loss. I think there's potential for that with a guy like Jackie Marshall. But the 3-down linemen that you're going to see down to down, they need to take up blockers and create disruption so those linebackers can go make plays. So I don't think we saw that last year. I think that can change this year. And we've talked about Utah's offensive line being probably, they're not incredibly inexperienced, but their least experienced group on their entire team right now. And so I'll move into that away from yours for my first key, the second key of the game total, but it's the linebackers. And I'll include the outside linebackers in this, containing Cam Rising from running specifically, but making tackles for loss. You can't run up the field on him. I don't care how many knee surgeries he's had. He's still a threat to run the ball. And if you can take that away and make him beat you passing, and even trying to beat you down the field passing, it starts with the front 7 and not just stopping the run, but making tackles for loss and making them not want to run the football, making them one-dimensional, as you mentioned. I guess he's lined up more than I thought they would, but like, go make plays, go be disruptive. And if you can do that, then you're going to test Cam Rising's legs naturally, because he's going to have to break outside the pocket, and you're going to see if he can run. I'm not saying he can't run, but is he the same runner as he was before his injury? So I want to see Matt Jones, Keaton Thomas, Garmin Randolph, Steve Linton. I mean, just go through the list of guys who could potentially be guys who make plays behind the line of scrimmage. They need to make plays in this game for Baylor to have a chance to win.
I think everything that you're saying is basically just they need to create havoc. and they need to be able to force Cam Rising out of a clean pocket. I think you're exactly right. That is so important in this game. You got to make Cam Rising uncomfortable. If you allow him to just stand in the pocket and look at your defense for 4 quarters, you're going to give up a lot of yards. You're going to give up a lot of points. And we've heard all offseason about how improved the edge position is, how really good Garmin Randolph, Steve Linton, Jacquez Evans, how this group is really, really good, and that these linebackers are really good at getting after the quarterback like Kendrick Simpkins and Keaton Thomas. And does that come to fruition against a good team? We'll kind of see on that as they kind of use more of a, I would say they're going to diversify a little bit. So I'm curious to see what the blitzes look like and kind of how they line up situationally against that Utah offense. So that lines up really well. I think my next key to this game is one that is very player focused, and it's all about stopping Brant Kuithe. I think that the star tight end for Utah is the biggest matchup problem on the field for Baylor. And I think he's the go-to guy for Cam Rising. I don't trust the other wide receivers to win consistently for Utah. None of them are really proven commodities. We'll see on that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Dorian Singer flashes back to 2022 and has a really good game. And maybe I'm off on that. But I do think that Brant Kuithe is a guy across the middle of the field who Baylor typically struggles with, and is a guy that gets open consistently, very reliable hands, a safety blanket for Cam Rising, a guy that's going to score in the red zone, and he's going to get first downs on offense. I think he is the kind of engine that starts everything for this offense, that takes it from, oh, this is going to be a low scoring grinded out game, to if you allow him to get loose, all of a sudden Utah's scoring 30 points in this game. And so I think he's a key one who Baylor's going to have to focus on. And I'm very curious, is that Carl Williams' responsibility? Is that, Kendrick Simpkins coming in and blitzing, and then you bring up a safety to cover him? Maybe Ra Dilworth factors into that in some way. I'm just very curious how Baylor decides to deal with him, because I do think that is a legit NFL guy, a guy who is going to create matchup problems for everyone in the Big 12, including Baylor.
Yeah, it is. And truthfully, Baylor addressed a lot of positions in the offseason, as we know, but I think specifically for matchups like this, they did a lot of work. They didn't want Matt Jones to have to run around chasing tight ends in passing situations all the time. They wanted guys out there who were natural. Their natural instincts are to cover guys. Ra Dilworth is that. Obviously, Carl Williams being able to play star is that. Kendrick Simpkins has played a lot of safety. Last year at the star position, Baylor had guys that had never played it at the college level. You talk about Bryson Jackson trying to play that position after moving from linebacker. He was never very natural there. Or Corey Gordon, who is he's going to be good in time, I believe. We saw him make some plays from the deep safety positions, but he had never played. He was a redshirt freshman last year. He had not done it. So I think their matchups in this specific game for these particular types of situations are what they addressed in the offseason. Even for a guy like Keaton Thomas, the ability to run with him. I mean, I think Aranda saw there is a need to not have to chase receivers with guys that are slower than the guys that are chasing. And they went after it and they found it. And you say, why do you bring in Ra Dilworth? He hasn't done much. Well, maybe he was really good in coverage and we just didn't see a ton of it. So I'm with you. I think being able to cover that second level, cover running backs out of the backfield, we saw that with wheel routes in Utah's first game to the running back. I can't remember his name right now, excuse me. But they're going to try to attack that second level of defenders, linebackers, stars, or your nickel back positions. I think Baylor's actually in a decent position. And if they can continue to play solid coverage there throughout the game, that's going to give them a great chance to win.
I definitely agree with that. And the running back that you're mentioning is Dejon Stanley, who I've actually noticed there's been quite a few articles written about him this week by people in Salt Lake City, just about his performance, how he's kind of gearing up to be a big part of this offense. It doesn't seem like Kyle Whittingham is going to make him their every down running back. But like we mentioned earlier this week, he is a guy who I just feel like of all the guys they have, he's the one guy who just looks really special as an athlete. Just the ability to make a guy miss and go score a touchdown. So it's going to be very important that they match up with him. I like that you said Keaton Thomas as potentially a guy that could guard Brant Kuithe. Curious how they do that. how they stretch out their coverage, if they're willing to, have him go out and cover and leave Matt Jones kind of by himself in the middle there. I'm curious about that. So that'll be definitely something to monitor and watch.
I think with that, I think it's if you ultimately get into a situation where Cam Rising switches the play to get that matchup, you feel a lot better about that matchup than you would have last year. That will linebacker position against the tight end. I think his flexibility, his experience in coverage, we saw it in game one, his understanding of the passing game is extremely valuable. It's not the ideal position that you want to be in with him, with one of your interior linebackers chasing the tight end. But if it gets into that situation, you feel pretty good about it. At least I feel pretty good about it as of today. Whereas last year, if it's Mike Smith early in the season, that was not his strength. His strength was not chasing tight ends. So that is why I think Keaton Thomas is valuable, is because it's not necessarily this glaring weakness if that situation arises.
Right. And I do think they're more prepared for it. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out. As far as my next kind of, I guess, storyline and kind of key for this Baylor defense, they got to force turnovers. And I don't quite know how many they have to force. I don't want to sit here and say they have to force 3 turnovers to win this game, because I don't think that's the case. But I do think they need to be around the football, and they're going to have to come up with at least 1, maybe 2 turnovers in this game. Probably somewhere in that range. But I think in general, that's likely going to come from either creating havoc, like you mentioned, or from a secondary, specifically the safeties. And the 2 Devons, Devin Lemire, Devin Bobby, I think they're going to get tested in this game. I think Utah is going to make it an effort to try to get them in one-on-one matchups and force them to make plays, because frankly, none of us got to see them really do a whole lot in coverage last game because they weren't tested at all. So I think in this one, they're going to get tested. But when you're tested, it gives you opportunities to make plays. And while Devin Bobby doesn't have, a bunch of interceptions to his name or a bunch of forced fumbles to his name, I do think that there is some of that in his DNA as a player. And as far as Devin Lemire goes, we've seen that. In 2022, he had a bunch of forced turnovers, and he was a guy that was extremely opportunistic. I think these 2 guys are going to have opportunities to make plays, and they're going to need to make at least 1 big play, I think, defensively when it comes to forcing a turnover.
Yeah, so I like how you're setting me up here, because that kind of plays into one of my keys, and it's secondary play calling and completely going anti what Utah wants to do and figuring out what Utah is trying to do, and then putting something out there that Utah is not expecting. And we mentioned it with Cam Rising, being able to get them in and out of play calls. What does Dave Aranda have? What does Matt Powledge have for the secondary that's going to give Cam Rising? He's seen, we know he has seen so much. So there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do to confuse him, but Dave Aranda truly has had an offseason to prepare for this specific game if he wanted to. They get more and more on tape throughout the season, but this is opportunity to say, hey, this is what we've worked on for this defense this offseason. Now it's our time to go out and put it. So it's not necessarily for Utah specifically, but what is this defense strengths going to be? Well, now's the time to do it, because if you you can't go into this game not anticipating to win. You have to go play this game to win the game, regardless of what it puts on the film. So we're going to see what Dave Aranda has the ability to do with his personnel. And if he trusts them to do it, I'm anxious to see it. And I think he can put some stuff in there that might allow this game to stay closer, because it slows the game down. Maybe Utah doesn't get off to a fast start because of what Baylor does. Maybe out after the scripted plays for Utah's game plan on offense, that defense settles in and is able to keep it close. And I'll go back to what you said about creating turnovers. I think the defense has to feed off its offense, in that if they can have a turnover margin that's even, it's going to give them the best chance to win. Obviously, if you're plus, but you better go make plays if your offense is struggling. This unit has to keep their offense in the game to give them a chance to win, because I think that the offense will pop a couple plays. I think they will have a couple of scores where there's too many athletes on that team that for Utah to completely shut them down, in my opinion. So if this defense can create this game, can build a game plan that allows it to remain close and stable, that's going to give them the best chance to win. And that comes with giving Cam Rising something that he might not have seen before to a great extent, and allow enough time for him to adjust that it keeps your offense chugging along and hopefully scoring and getting up early in the game.
I do think it's a really good point, kind of what you mentioned about prepping for this game and how they've kind of had all off season to really be ready for this one. And it's also interesting that, they play Air Force the next week, a triple option team. And then the next week you're facing a completely different scheme in Colorado that's trying to spread you out and really attack you vertically, basically in an air raid type scheme. And so it's very interesting to see kind of how they game plan throughout the offseason for these three specific matchups right in a row. Because really, once you prepare for those three, it prepares you for the entire year. There's really not too many different offenses when you look through the league, at least. So, yeah, I think that is something that is worth mentioning. I was going to mention the matchup between Dave Aranda and Andy Ludwig, the offense coordinator at Utah. I think this is one of those situations where we've talked all offseason about Dave Aranda. We've talked all offseason about him being the play caller, him really taking control of this defense for the first time since LSU. This is the first time that he's really gone all in on ball, gone all in on being the play caller, being the guy that's setting up everything for these matchups. So I'm curious how that looks because he's going to get tested in this one, unlike he was in the first one. So I'm curious, not necessarily does he still have it, because I do think he absolutely does. He knows a lot of football, and I think that's very clear. But I just think this is the first time we get to see it on full display against a very respected offensive coordinator in Andy Ludwig that's going to come in with a whole bunch of tricks up his sleeve. I think he's going to try to scheme a lot of things open, much like they did in the first game. So there is going to be a chess match there, and that is something that I think I'm very intrigued by, just as someone that's watched Baylor over the course of the last few years. I'm just curious how that chess match works.
Yeah, I definitely do not think that Dave Aranda showed us everything from his defense in game one against Tarleton. And I think there's going to be a lot of differences. There's a lot of new personnel. It's not Matt Howledge calling the plays anymore. There's different tendencies from Coach Aranda. And truthfully, like, you just have a guy that's experienced in calling plays. Even though he hasn't done it in a while, his years of experience are much different than what Matt Howledge's were last year when he was calling plays. That was Matt's full responsibility. And to his credit, he's fully embraced it. And so I think Dave Aranda being able to go into this game basically guns blazing and say, hey, this is what we got. Let's see what you can do with it. I think he might not act like it, but I think he's pretty pumped. Like, I think he has to be pretty excited to get in this game and say, hey, we're 17 or 14 and a half point underdogs right now. What do we have to lose? Let's just go throw the kitchen sink at him right now, because and I go back to that first game, but like, I truly feel like this defense has enough playmakers that they're going to create issues for all teams that they play, wherever it might be. Every single level has a guy that can go make plays. And I think that Coach Aranda knows that, and his ability to scheme and create issues from multiple level is what's going to potentially sway this game in Baylor's direction.
And for Dave Aranda, it's kind of always been this consistent theme of, can we win up front? That's really always been a staple for Dave Aranda defense, is winning up front. And I think it's pretty clear this defensive line has taken a step forward. I think it's clear the linebackers and star position have taken steps forward as well. So now, how does that all come together? And does that mean that this defense is going to be really good? I don't think we have an answer to that yet, but I do think they're in a better position to succeed than they were a year ago, based on the personnel, based on the fact that Dave Aranda kind of has the structure that I feel like he needs to have a good defense. Like, I think he's got the personnel. And yeah, it's exciting. It's going to be very interesting, I think, to watch that and kind of see, how does it all come together for him? How does it all come together for this defense? And ultimately, are they able to go on the road and get a huge win, a rather historic win against a very good Utah team?
Yeah, nothing to lose. I mean, they can go out and play all out. There's no pressure on their end, in my opinion. I mean, I think there's game pressure, as there always is. But all right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to Coach Cheney for hopping on today, and thank you all so much for listening. For Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Thursday, and Sick 'em Bears.